Hello everybody and welcome to episode 1 of the DenziBlitz. I'm Mike Brown, your host, and today, as promised in episode 0 last week, this is the beginning of my blitz through Tokusou Sentai Dekaranger. This actually isn't the SP license, the transformation device from Dekaranger. It's the toy from Power Rangers SPD, but hell, you get the point, right? So, a little bit of background, briefly, because I went over some last week in episode 0, though that was more about why we're doing the show than anything else. Dekaranger airs in 2004, at least that's what my notes say. It airs in 2004. This was the very first Super Sentai show that I ever saw beginning to end as it aired in Japan through fan subbers, so very special to me, and that's why we're kind of going back through and rewatching it. I have not watched this show in a number of years, so this is sort of like deja vu. I kind of remember what's going on, but not entirely, and I know some of the big stuff that's coming, but I'm going to do my best to not let that color our discussions here on the show. Now, of course, this airs, DenziBlitz, on Facebook first, and then a week from today, you will see it show up on YouTube. So, every Wednesday, first run on Facebook, then the following week on YouTube, you'll see the DenziBlitz. No frills, no special graphics, no music, it's just me and you, and talking about our favorite toku. Now, Tokusou Sentai Dekaranger is the first, in my opinion, the first true police Sentai. Now, similar themes have been used before, dating all the way back to the original Super Sentai Go Ranger, Jacker, Battle Fever J, and there were others, used a paramilitary police force-ish type theme, where all of our heroes were members of some government or military peacekeeping type organization, but were never really called the police. Usually it was something much larger. Mirai Sentai Time Ranger actually does refer to their characters as police officers, basically. They're the Time Rangers. They're time cops, hoping not to invoke the memories of a bad Jean-Claude Van Damme movie there. But they are police, though the show, beyond the fact that they're tracking down a mafia boss as the main bad guy of the series, doesn't really evoke that theme to me overly much. It has some trappings, but not the full-on motif. It's not a police show. Dekaranger, as much as any Super Sentai can be, is a cop show. They are police officers. We see them working out of their precinct, or in this case, the Deka base on Earth. We see them working cases thus far, and I've watched episodes 1 through 6 up to this point. Not as many as I was hoping to watch, but real life happens. So it was sort of a case of the week thus far, with only little hints of an overarching bad guy. There was so much about this show, I remember when I first watched it, that I really, really dug. And so today, we're not going to be going through on any of these episodes full-on episode-by-episode reviews, because if we did, 1, the show would take forever to record, and 2, it's not what we're here for. It's basically talking about impressions and thoughts about the episode. So if you want to know, I want to see the episodes, there are plenty of great fan sub-sites out there where you can get them. If you want to see us talk about on DenziCaster our episode-by-episode thoughts on different shows, head over to the ECS Network on YouTube. That's where we do that. Although right now the show we're talking about over there is Kamen Rider Drive. Oddly, also a police tokusatsu show, but what you gonna do, right? So I made notes, which I don't typically do, but it's just me and you, so I didn't want to ramble too much, and I'm rambling on a whole lot right now, but hey, we'll try and cut me a little slack. So, whenever I look at one of these shows and start thinking about it, I don't want to really use the word critically, but when I start thinking about it from a sense of what do I like, what do I dislike, I do kind of mentally break it down into certain categories. And the first thing to me is always the visuals. because that's what smacks you in the face first. What you see first is what you process first. In a lot of ways, that's your first impression. As far as this show is concerned, and I remember this from when I first watched it, the costumes to me were so very unique. The hero, the ranger costumes, the Deca suits, they call them in the show, they have this very sleek, very futuristic look to them, which fits the setting at that time. And it was very different than anything I had ever seen in Power Rangers. Keeping in mind that Power Rangers really begins with Zyuranger, and if you're looking at it from the Super Sentai standpoint, it starts with Zyuranger and goes to the present day. So anything before that, I had not seen before when I saw Dekaranger. And the costumes in this show were very unique, and I think part of that is due to the fact that they're very asymmetrical. Now, Super Sentai has done asymmetrical costumes before, but keep in mind that most of us here in the U.S. are children of Power Rangers when it comes to our Tokusatsu fandom. We either started with Power Rangers and moved on, or we discovered other Tokusatsu and then got into Power Rangers. Either way, we are all impacted by Zyuranger Ford as seen through the eyes of either Haim Saban or Disney. And pretty much, with very limited exception, as I'm thinking through right now, every Power Rangers era Super Sentai, so to speak, has had a symmetrical costume, barring a logo here or there, like the Alien Rangers, aka the Kaku Ranger in Japan, had a lightning bolt on one side as a badge, and so in that regard, yeah, it was asymmetrical, but the rest of the costume, take the lightning bolt off, it's symmetrical. Same thing for Die Ranger, although we never got those suits here in the States. The only one I can think of off the top of my head that is not asymmetrical out of Power Rangers was Wild Force. So, that Wild Force was the only asymmetrical costume I can think of. All the rest of them were, like I said, with the exception of a badge on one side or the other, they were symmetrical costumes. That's pleasing to the eye, symmetry. We look for that. So to have this asymmetrical costume and to have it look so unique and so sleek with the numbers on one side of the costume denoting the rank, so to speak, of the Rangers was pretty cool, pretty awesome. The uniforms themselves, the civilian uniforms, I shouldn't really say civilian uniforms, the police uniforms worn by our heroes when they're not transformed, also struck me as very interesting and very unique, because it looks like a uniform, or at least as much a uniform is going to look like in a children's television show. It does have that vibe, that feel to it, the iconography of the SPD logo, which in this case means Special Police Dekaranger, as opposed to Space Patrol Delta. The uniforms looked very unique, very nice. They looked like they all belonged together to some organization. And despite the liberal addition of color coding, which happens in any of these shows, parts of those costumes begin to make sense in the first 6 episodes. I remember when I first watched, one of the things that always struck me as weird and that I didn't like was there were these colored patches on the sleeve, colored rectangular patches, that seemed to make no sense because they were the only part of the costume that looked like they were vinyl or pleather or something like that. Until Pink's focus episode, which happens, or her first focus episode, happens in the first 6, I believe it's episode 5, where she takes the patch off and you see that those are actually their crime scene gloves. So they put some functionality and thought into those costumes. We see that again in episode 6 when all of them do it, not just Deca Pink, Umiko. So I like the look of the show, the sets and such. They didn't break the bank. They did not have that fat Disney cash coming in just yet because Disney had not been in charge of Power Rangers and paying the license fees for very long. Power Rangers at this point, Dino Thunder was airing in the U.S. It was the second show completely under Disney. Ninja Storm didn't do that great. SPD looked head and shoulders above the following year. But it's not fair to make that comparison too much, because while there's obviously going to be comparisons, it's the American adaptation of Dekaranger. It was on Disney's dime, so yeah. But the sets for the Japanese version, the sets for Dekaranger, they fit. And that's, to me, is the big thing. Everything has to fit the theme. If it bounces you out at any point, then there's a problem. And they don't do that. So I love the look of the sets, the simplicity of them. And it does kind of what you would imagine a futuristic Japanese police room might look like in a lot of ways. The alien costumes. Episode 1, in the pre-credit sequence, so to speak, gives you an indication of what you're going to get out of the aliens in this show, and it ain't a whole lot early on. In the first episode, we see Cadet Asuka Bonbon, who is destined to be our Red Ranger, Deca Red. We see him chasing down an alien across some faraway planet on a highway. He winds up crashing through a wedding. And it's a wedding of two feline aliens who, frankly, look like a step below Muppets as far as the quality of the costuming. They look like basically like sports mascots with, more or less, with maybe a slightly better production value. But that's what they look like. They don't look like high-end makeup special effects kind of deal. They look like mascot costumes. This continues to ring true when you see our commander, Doggy Kruger, who is basically a big blue furry dog. So, as I say, the alien costumes are pretty cheesy. Not bad, but cheesy. And what makes you buy into it... Now, the monsters and the aliens are two different things, because the monsters are threats. They look actually quite good, but a lot of it, I don't want to say throwaway aliens, because Doggy's not one, but a lot of the aliens in the show, the ones that aren't to be the focus of something, are looking a little cheesy thus far. But it's the acting behind them that helps. For instance, Doggy Kruger. I remember when I first watched this very early on, I was like, okay, this is what we're going with. We got a big blue furry dog as our Zordon type character. And the more I watched it, the suit actor does a wonderful job of emoting and getting across the scenes as Doggy Kruger. And the voice actor has a lot of weight, a lot of gravity. He sounds like an old cop. And so when you put the two of them together, the suit acting and the voice acting, and to be honest, I'm not sure if it's the same guy or not. I'll do a little research on that before I record again, before we talk next week. But the idea of it being, these two performances creating this one character that really does seem like he is the old seasoned detective. And the gravity of the performance overshadows the cheesiness of the costume, which is to this show's credit. And I'll come to the rest of the acting in a minute, because there's a lot to say, I think, about it very early on. The last thing kind of visually to look at was the mecha. First things first, and it's a trend that you don't see a whole lot in Super Sentai or Power Rangers that often, is they do show you the individual components of our combined robot, the Megazord in Power Rangers. We see the individual machines first. We see that they can actually do things on their own first. We see these function as combat-capable vehicles, not simply useless modes of transport that are only going to get the job done when they combine into the giant robot. So we actually do get to see them individually do things, and we get to see it more than once here in the first 6 episodes. We see it in episode 1. You don't even see Dekaranger Robo. We don't even see that in episode 1. And in episode 3, you do see it, but you see it at the beginning of the episode. When it comes time to beat the giant threat at the end of the episode, it's the individual mecha that do that. It's not the giant robot. So, very cool in that regard. Dekaranger Robo, one of my all-time favorite Super Sentai Robo designs. I don't know how much of that is nostalgia in that this was the first one I saw, or how much of that is just, it's a really cool design. I do like the police motif. They get it across very well. When you see it combined and you have all the sirens and beacons going off at the same time, it looks really epic. I like it. The individual component mecha, the Deca machines, I'm not a fan of. They look a little clunky to me. So, but like I said, the actual gigantic mecha, awesome. And the bad guys mecha are awesome. This is the first time I'd ever seen where the bad guys pilot mecha as the giant forms more often than they grow giant. In fact, it's not until episode 6 that we actually see, Make My Monster Grow, where we actually see one of the monsters of the week get grown giant size. The acting. And the rest of these I'll probably just try and touch on quickly because we're running a little longer. The acting, frankly, is good from Jump Street, which surprised me more now than when I saw it to begin with. I've seen a lot more Super Sentai over the last 12 years. And watching the actors come together and gel and grow is just part of watching one of these shows. You don't expect good from the word go. You expect passable, and then you expect between good and great, depending on what it was like at the beginning, by the end of the show. And I use all these in the terms of the show you're watching. You're great by the terminology of a tokusatsu show is still not going to win the award for best acting in a dramatic series at the Emmys. So this show, they're good from the word go. And you see the dynamics developing from the word go. And everyone has a distinct personality. So I very much appreciate the acting in this show. Even if it is formulaic. And I didn't know that when I first watched it. But this show pretty much follows the stock Super Sentai formula. Or one of. So one of the tropes for your Sentai Reds are that they are the hot-headed, brash type character. That is Deca Red, Bon. Blue, one of the big stereotypes for Blue is that they are the calm, cool, and collected type. And that is, Cool Blue. That is Hoji in this series. With Yellow, one of the big archetypes is that essentially the tomboy, the not typical girl. And that is very much Jasmine. You have our Green, who is in Sinchan, who is very much the unorthodox intellectual and a little awkward. So that's very much in fitting with the green/black tropes, depending on which color gets used that season. And then you have our very girly girl, Pink, in Umiko, so in the Pink Princess. So that it's very formulaic in that regard, but it's very well done as well. So I really enjoy the acting. The villains in this show, I couldn't really tell you a whole lot about up to this point. The Monsters of the Week have been cool. It's very much a case of the week police procedural show. Sometimes a two-parter, sometimes a one and done. Here up to episode 6, the first 2 is a 2-part episode. Essentially the series opener. The next 2 episodes, which focus on Hoji, Deca Blue, again are a 2-part episode. Episode 5 focuses on Pink. Episode 6 focuses on Green. So those are one and dones. But so far we're getting teases of someone that if he's not pulling the strings, he's a major player, and that is Agent Ablera. And I probably just murdered the name because it's been a long. I always said Agent Abera, but there are different translations of it. Somebody out there, feel free to correct me on that in the comments. But basically Bat Agent, bat wings and a head in a jar, is very much a sinister character, always seen in the shadows. We don't actually see him act until episode 6, and even then it's only for a moment. We don't see him at all in episode 1. He's teased in episode 2. So this is a slow roll for this character in the series. But as far as an easily identifiable big bad from episode 1 going forward, we haven't seen that yet. The music in this show. God, I love the music in Dekaranger. It is incredible. This is the first time Psychic Lover does music for a Super Sentai show. It's not the last. And I don't think it's too big of a stretch to say that I think their two most iconic Super Sentai themes are, which may be the only two they've done, off the top of my head. They did the theme for Dekaranger, and they do the theme for Shinkenger, which became Power Rangers Samurai here in the U.S. And I don't think it's any surprise to me personally when I think about it that those are probably two of my favorite Super Sentai theme songs. Psychic Lover did a tremendous job on the soundtrack for that song, and I think they do a few other songs throughout, but they do a tremendous job here, as does everyone behind the music on Dekaranger, because it very much fits. It feels like what you would expect out of a superhero cop show. So far, everything really hits that theme on all notes, and I'm really digging the show basically from the word go. So the 6 episodes we've watched. Another thing, and this will be the last thing I'll hit on before we wrap up this go-round, is that I really enjoy when the show manages to strike the balance between creativity and commercial. It is something that I've thought is a failing of a lot of tokusatsu shows, especially as of late, where they are conceived commercially first, creatively second. Now, I've always said, never mistake the fact that what you are watching is essentially a 20-minute toy commercial. But with that said, you can tell a good story and have engaging characters and such, even for a children's show, which this is, and still sell stuff. And Dekaranger does a tremendous job. It is not overly toyetic. They show off the individual machines a lot in the first 6 episodes. They show off Murphy, who is the canine companion, the robotic dog that helps them out. They show him off. He basically gets as much focus in Pink's episode as Pink does. We see all the toys, but we see them in a way that does make sense and doesn't feel like they're just shoehorning them in because we have to sell things. So I really do like that, and I think that's an example anyone out there that makes these series can follow in the future. Is you don't have to sell all the toys in a contrived manner. A little bit of common sense and a little bit of creative storytelling, and you can get all those wonderful things that you want to sell in the toy stores out there for kids to see, and still have it make sense and have it not look as much like a commercial as it really is. So, 6 episodes into my rewatch of Dekaranger. I'm really digging it. Next week we'll have hopefully more than another 6 episodes. I'm hoping to get through this series relatively quickly. So we'll say somewhere between 6 and 10 episodes I will have watched by the time we talk again. Hope you are enjoying, or hope you have enjoyed this episode of DenziBlitz. Please remember to share and like and all those things we do here on Facebook. Don't forget to jump over to the ECS Network, over on YouTube, where you can check out the rest of our video shows. You can check out the DenziCaster Roll Call Season 1. Those are going to be going up hopefully in the next couple of months. We're in the process of shooting them now. If you got any ideas for stuff you want us to talk about, let me know. We've got a few really good ideas so far. And then also our bi-weekly episodes of DenziCaster, our panel discussion show where we talk about episodes or of tokusatsu shows we're watching at the time, or different movies. Right now, the big 2 things, we're in Kamen Rider land right now. We're doing Kamen Rider Amazon and Kamen Rider, Kamen Rider Amazons have to make that distinction. Now we're watching Amazons, and then we're watching Kamen Rider Drive, which we're getting ready to wrap up here on our end in the not too distant future. So don't forget to check us out on the ECS Network over on YouTube. Share, like, subscribe in all the various social places. And until next week, I'm Mike Brown. We will see you for more of Tokusou Sentai Dekaranger on the DenziBlitz. See you next week.